Ever wonder what really happens behind the scenes every time you board a plane? There are secrets built into nearly every part of the flying experience, from the codes on your boarding pass to the buttons flight attendants quietly press when no one's looking. You're about to discover the airline industry's most closely guarded truths, and some of them might make you think twice before your next flight. Let's start with a tiny detail that could cause a massive headache. 4 little letters on your boarding pass. SSS. Most travelers never notice it, but if those letters ever appear next to your name, it means you've been flagged. You're about to go through extra security screening, have your bags torn apart, and maybe even get pulled aside for questioning. Why? It could be anything from booking a one-way ticket to paying in cash, or you might have just been chosen at random. It's a system designed for security, but feels more like surveillance roulette. And if you're wondering whether airlines will ever tell you why you were selected, they won't. But before you even get to security, let's talk about a mistake almost every traveler makes. Boarding first. Sounds like a good idea, right? Get on early, stash your bag, claim your space. In reality, boarding early just means you'll spend more time cramped in your seat, breathing recycled air, waiting for everyone else. Smart frequent flyers do the opposite. They board last. No waiting in the aisle, no crowd shoving past. You and your seat's already reserved, but here's the catch. If your carry-on is bulky, you might lose out on overhead space. Worst case, your bag gets checked, and suddenly you're stuck waiting at baggage claim while everyone else walks. Right out. So what's better, legroom or luggage control? Still, none of that compares to the unsettling truth about what's behind that tiny bathroom door. Most passengers assume it's the one truly private space on a plane, but flight attendants can open it from the outside. Yep, all it takes is lifting the lavatory sign and sliding a hidden latch. It's there in case someone locks themselves in or there's an emergency. But it also means the next time you think you're alone at 35,000 feet, you might not be. Privacy isn't the only illusion up in the air. Ever feel your stomach drop mid-flight and assume the plane just nosedived? Relax. Turbulence, almost. Never causes a real problem. Pilots deal with it daily. It usually drops the aircraft only a few feet, even when it feels like a theme park ride. But what pilots actually fear? Something far more dangerous, an updraft. It's a massive vertical air current, sometimes invisible at night, capable of suddenly lifting a plane to unsafe altitudes. Unlike turbulence, which bounces the plane around, updrafts can overpower the engines, and there's not always enough warning to dodge them. And while you're feeling the bumps, something else is quietly happening in the cockpit. Hear those. Random dings and chimes during your flight. Each one means something specific. A single ding after takeoff usually means the landing gear is safely retracted. 3 dings in a row, that's an urgent message between crew members. And a double chime, high-low, is often used when turbulence is ahead and flight attendants need to secure everything immediately. So the next time you hear a ding and then see a flight attendant suddenly pick up speed, buckle in, something's coming. But even if things go completely wrong, both engines fail, systems shut down, don't panic. Planes are designed to glide, not fall. In fact, pilots can usually control and direct a glide for up to 20 minutes after total engine failure. There are dozens of real-life stories where a plane lost all power and still landed safely. The movies love to show planes dropping from the sky. In reality, pilots are trained to fly them like gliders. The only thing they need? Enough altitude to find a safe place to touch down. Meanwhile, your taste buds are getting tricked. If you've ever wondered why airplane food tastes like nothing, it's not the airline's fault, it's science. At cruising altitude, cabin pressure and dry air actually dull your sense of taste by up to 30%. Sweet and salty foods lose their punch. That's why airline meals are overloaded with salt and spices, just to taste normal. Here's a tip. Use noise-cancelling headphones. Studies show reducing background noise actually helps restore some of your taste perception. Yes, science can make chicken Alfredo edible again. And while you're focused on the food, the dirtiest parts of the plane are hiding in plain sight. It's not the bathroom, it's the seat pocket, the tray table, the headrest, and the seatbelt buckle. Studies have found bacteria, mold, even traces of yeast living on surfaces people touch constantly. 1/3 of seatbelts test positive for microbial growth, and headrests almost never cleaned between flights. If you want to stay healthy, bring sanitizing wipes and clean your area before you settle in. Think of it as your personal pre-flight checklist. There's another pre-flight routine happening that most people never hear about. When your pilot says they're waiting on paperwork, they're not just filling out forms. They're reviewing the flight path, confirming the plane's weight balance, and sometimes waiting for last-minute mechanical sign-offs from ground crew. It's less about red tape and more about making sure the aircraft is actually safe to fly. And on longer routes, there's one more secret. Crew members have hidden sleeping quarters. Usually tucked behind the cockpit or above the cabin ceiling, these compartments hold up to 10 beds, a full sleeping space you'll never see unless you work there. While passengers are squeezing into tiny seats, the crew is catching real. Rest behind the scenes, and even the shape of the plane itself has secrets. Those round windows? That design wasn't always standard. Planes once had square windows, until engineers realized the sharp corners created pressure points that could crack under stress. Several mid-air disasters later, the industry moved to curved windows, which distribute pressure more evenly and keep the cabin intact. So yes, window shape can literally be the difference between safety and catastrophe. Now, for something really wild, lightning. Commercial planes get struck by lightning more often than you think, usually at least once a year per aircraft. But here's the twist. Planes don't just get hit by lightning. Sometimes they cause it. When flying through certain storm clouds, the friction between the metal fuselage and the atmosphere can generate static electricity that actually triggers a bolt. Fortunately, the plane's aluminum shell is designed to conduct the current safely around the cabin and back into the air. You might see a flash or hear a pop, but the plane itself is built to shrug it off. So the next time you board a plane, you'll know that every detail, from a dinging chime to a hidden switch in the bathroom, tells a bigger story. The secrets of air travel aren't just about comfort or convenience. They're about control, risk, and a whole lot of design choices you were never meant to notice. And if this is what we're allowed to know, imagine what else they're not telling us. Ever taken a quick glance at your boarding pass and noticed a strange string of letters? If you ever spot SSS printed on it, you're in for a very different kind of trip, and not the relaxing kind. That small code, usually tucked in near the corner, means you've been flagged for secondary. Security screening selection. Sounds official, feels invasive. It's the government's quiet way of saying, we're not quite sure about you. Get ready for full bag checks, pat-downs, and questions that range from slightly weird to wildly uncomfortable. You might even be pulled aside and miss your boarding group. So what triggers this mystery label? It could be something as simple as buying a one-way ticket, paying in cash, or booking your flight at the last minute. Other times, you're just randomly chosen, or so they say. Some travelers claim they've been flagged more than once, raising questions no one at the check-in counter seems able or willing to answer. Even weirder, once you've got the SSSS mark, it's tough to shake. There's no public list of who's tracked and no official explanation of how to get off it. In rare cases, people have had to go through legal hoops just to travel normally again. You could be a regular tourist and still end up treated like a person of interest. But that quiet little code isn't the only hidden system working behind the scenes when you fly. Because while you're preparing to stand in line and shuffle onto the plane like everyone else, experienced flyers are playing a completely different game. Most travelers rush to board the plane the moment their group is called. It feels instinctive. Get on early, claim your space, avoid the hassle. But seasoned flyers know that getting on first often means you're doing it wrong. Unless you're desperate for overhead bin space, boarding early just traps you in your seat longer. You sit in a narrow aisle, elbow to elbow, breathing dry, recycled air while everyone else bumps past you, taking their time, dragging bags, blocking your legroom. It's not just inconvenient, it's claustrophobic. The real pros? They hang back. Frequent flyers will loiter near the gate, wait until the last call, and stroll on with zero stress. Their seats are already assigned, and they don't mind letting everyone else do the hard part first. Boarding. Last means less waiting, less standing in line, and less time stuck in your seat before takeoff. You skip the crowd, avoid the bottleneck on the jet bridge, and walk onto a plane that's almost ready to go. Simple, efficient, smarter. But there's one exception, and it's a big one. If you're traveling with a bulky carry-on, boarding. Last can backfire fast. Overhead bins fill up quickly, and late boarders are the first to lose out. Once those bins are full, flight attendants start gate-checking bags, often without asking. That means you'll be separated from your belongings for the entire flight. And worse, you'll be waiting at baggage claim even if you only brought a carry-on to avoid that exact situation. So, while skipping the early crowd feels like a power move, you're always playing a game of luggage roulette. And if you think that's stressful, Wait until you find out what's really going on with that tiny airplane bathroom. Most passengers think the airplane bathroom is the only place on the flight where they get a moment of true privacy. You lock the door, hear the click, and assume you're sealed off from the rest of the cabin. But here's the part. Airlines don't advertise. That door can be unlocked from the outside. No code, no key, no alarm. Just a small latch hidden under the lavatory sign. Flip it, slide the bolt, and the door swings right open. Even if someone's inside, it's built as a safety feature, not a spy tool. If someone locks themselves in, passes out, or worse, flight attendants need a fast way in. But knowing anyone on the crew can open that door while you're mid-flight, vulnerable, and thousands of feet in the air gives a whole new meaning to captive audience. Some passengers have even reported incidents where attendants unlocked the door without warning, citing safety concerns that were never fully explained. And here's the unnerving truth. If there's an incident in that bathroom, you're not protected by the lock. You're trusting that the crew uses discretion. It's just one of many systems on a plane that give the illusion of control while quietly removing it. But that's nothing compared to the danger pilots face, not inside the cabin, but outside the aircraft, in the one kind of weather even. They can't fully predict. If you've ever gripped your armrest during a bout of turbulence, bracing for the worst, you're not alone. Most passengers fear those sudden jolts that rattle the cabin and make your stomach drop. But here's what pilots won't tell you during those bumpy stretches. Turbulence almost never puts the flight in real danger. It might feel intense, but in most cases, the plane only dips or rises by a few feet. The aircraft is built to handle far worse. In fact, pilots are so used to turbulence that they barely flinch. They might adjust altitude or route slightly, but their heart rate barely changes. What actually rattles them? A completely different beast, updrafts. Unlike turbulence, which comes in waves and shakes the plane around, an updraft is a sudden vertical current of air that can hurl a plane upward without warning. Sometimes it's linked to thunderstorms, other times it's invisible, and if it hits at night, radar might not pick it up in time. Updrafts can lift a plane thousands of feet in seconds, pushing it toward altitudes it wasn't meant to reach, especially dangerous when flying near mountains or during descent. Pilots can try to steer clear, but when the instruments don't catch it in time, it becomes a split-second decision. Do they climb higher and risk hitting weather systems that are even worse, or ride it out and hope the aircraft stabilizes? These aren't scenarios that show up on the passenger safety card. And while everyone in the cabin is thinking turbulence, the crew might be silently managing something far more serious, without a word. But while the skies hold their share of threats, there's another layer of mystery that happens inside. The plane too, one you've probably heard but never understood. The ding, one chime, two chimes, three. Each one means something specific, and knowing what they mean can reveal far more about your flight than the safety announcement ever will. You've probably heard them without thinking twice. Those random chimes and dings echoing through the cabin mid-flight. One soft tone right after takeoff, another before landing, sometimes a few in quick succession. They sound harmless, even forgettable, but every single one of them carries a coded message. Not for you, for the crew. And once you know what they mean, you'll never hear them the same way again. That single chime after takeoff, that usually means the landing gear has been fully retracted and the flight is transitioning into climb mode. All clear, nothing to worry about. But when you hear a high-low chime, like a digital doorbell, that's not small talk. That's a signal between crew members, typically that the cockpit needs something or that conditions are about to shift. And if you ever hear 3 consecutive low chimes in a row, things are getting serious. That's often the sign that flight attendants need to immediately secure the cabin. Trays up, carts locked, and everyone seated, because turbulence is about to hit harder than expected. And no, the captain doesn't always make an announcement. These signals are designed to communicate fast, quietly, and efficiently, especially in situations where every second matters. It's a silent language in the sky, and the crew is trained to respond without hesitation. While passengers are casually watching a movie or dozing off, flight attendants might be tightening belts and locking down compartments because they've just been warned something is coming. But even if the cabin gets shaky and the clouds outside start to churn, here's a fact that might surprise you. Even in a worst-case scenario where things go dark and quiet and both engines fail, your plane still wouldn't just fall from the sky. Because modern aircraft are built with one last trick up their sleeve. And it might be the only reason some flights have ended in survival rather than disaster. It sounds like the ultimate nightmare. Both engines fail, the cabin goes quiet, and the plane begins to descend. Most people imagine that means instant doom. A free fall, no control, total chaos. But the reality is almost the opposite. Commercial aircraft are designed to glide, not drop. Even without engine power, a plane can stay airborne for much longer than you'd expect. And in the hands of a trained pilot, that silent descent can turn into a controlled, life-saving maneuver. Most commercial jets have a glide ratio of about 15:1, meaning for every mile of altitude lost, they can travel up to 15 miles forward. At cruising altitude, let's say 35,000 feet, that gives the pilot roughly 80 to 100 miles of range to search for a safe landing spot. No engines doesn't mean no hope. It means time. And that time is everything. There are real stories to back this up. Pilots have landed wide-body jets on rivers, abandoned runways, even frozen lakes, with no engines, no thrust, and sometimes no instruments. And while you were gripping your seat thinking the worst, the crew in the cockpit was calculating glide paths, scanning terrain, and staying eerily calm under pressure. That's not movie drama. That's real training, drilled over and over again for the scenario everyone hopes never comes. But if it does, they're ready. So the next time you hear the engines go unusually quiet or feel the plane begin to descend more steeply than usual, don't assume the worst. It might be silent up there, but silence doesn't mean surrender. And while the pilots are managing physics, there's something else affecting your flight that's way less technical. And it's been messing with your senses the entire time. You unwrap your tray, peel back the foil, and stare down at a meal. That looks vaguely edible. Bland pasta, overcooked rice, chicken that tastes like nothing. Airplane food has a terrible reputation. But here's the twist. It's not the food that's the problem. It's you, or more specifically, your taste buds. At 35,000 feet, your body changes. The cabin is pressurized to simulate around 6,000, 8,000 feet above sea level, and that environment dulls your sense of taste, particularly salty and sweet flavors. Studies show your taste perception drops by up to 30% mid-flight. Foods you'd eat normally enjoy suddenly seem flat, flavorless, or oddly metallic. That's why airline meals are packed with extra sodium, seasoning, and sauces. They're not trying to overdo it, they're just trying to make you taste anything at all. But there's a strange trick that might help. Researchers found that background noise also affects taste. Specifically, the constant drone of the engines. That low, loud hum interferes with your brain's ability to process flavor. The solution? Noise-canceling headphones. By blocking out the ambient roar, your taste buds sharpen. It won't turn mushy lasagna into gourmet cuisine, but it might make it slightly more tolerable. Science, oddly enough, can season your food. And speaking of food, here's a fact most passengers never consider. Pilots and co-pilots don't eat the same meals. That's not a quirky preference. It's a safety protocol. If one meal turns out to be contaminated, the other pilot needs to stay healthy enough to fly. Even if they both really want the same dish, they don't eat it at the same time. One waits, watches, and only digs in after confirming the other's fine. It's one of those invisible layers of protection in place to make sure the people flying the plane stay fully functional, even if the food tries to sabotage them. But while you're cautiously chewing and sipping from a plastic cup, something much more dangerous might already be sitting right under your nose. Not in the galley, not in the bathroom, right there in your seat. You might assume the dirtiest part of an airplane is the bathroom. A cramped space with questionable smells, a sticky floor, and a trash bin always just a little too full. But the real danger zone? It's your seat. More specifically, everything around it. The headrest, the tray table, the seatbelt buckle, and especially the seat back pocket. They're all breeding grounds for bacteria, and they almost never get properly cleaned between flights. Studies have found that tray tables can carry more bacteria than a public toilet. Why? Because passengers use them for everything. Eating, sleeping, changing diapers, placing used tissues, resting bare arms, even clipping fingernails. And while you might assume that cleaning crews come through and wipe everything down, the reality is far less comforting. Turnaround times between flights are tight, and deep cleaning isn't the priority. Most surfaces get a quick once-over, if that. But tray tables aren't even the worst offender. Seat pockets are basically garbage dumps. People stuff dirty tissues, old snacks, and sometimes used bath bags in there, and those items stay for multiple flights. Flight attendants have admitted they often don't check them at all unless something's visibly leaking. Then there's the headrest, which sits right against your skin and hair. It's made of absorbent fabric and rarely disinfected, making it a hotspot for oil, sweat, and skin bacteria from dozens of passengers before you. Even your seatbelt buckle, the one thing you touch every flight, harbors yeast, mold, and grime. It's rarely sanitized and handled constantly. So if you really want to stay germ-free in the air, forget about fancy masks and neck pillows. What you need is a small pack of sanitizing wipes and the discipline to clean every surface around you before you settle in. Because while everyone's worried about turbulence, security, and legroom, the thing most likely to ruin your trip might be invisible and already crawling across your armrest. And yet, for all the hygiene issues you can see, some of the most interesting secrets on a